being able to get a job, being employable with a philosophy degree. So there's sort of a practical concern about it. And so we wanted to talk to some people who've gone off and done all kinds of cool stuff despite the fact that they had a philosophy degree. So that's sort of part of it. But the more interesting piece to me is like how you did all these cool, interesting things in part because you had a philosophy degree. You know, so not just the reassuring part that it's not because of death, but how did this shape your choices or how you approach things? If it did, you know, the answer to a lot of these questions may also be, philosophy was fun, but I don't see it showing up in my work. I don't see it present anywhere, and that's also fine. Obviously, not a test. So I guess what we said we'd start with is we'll just ask each of you to sort of introduce yourselves and say a few words about what you do now, sort of where you've ended up, and then I'll probably open up with how you got into philosophy, and then we'll take it from there about how that turned into jobs and skills and stuff. So would you like to start?
Sure. So my name is Julius. Nice to meet you guys. I graduated in 2006. Just before, and that is important because that was just before the economy crashed in 2008, which was actually a pretty remarkable time. Right when I was graduating, I was actually absolutely intent on becoming a professor. So I moved, I stayed at home, I worked, I saved a lot of money for a year, and I actually moved directly to Belgium. I went to the University of Leuven there. There was a professor at the time who set me up with his in-laws, who I stayed with, and it was really actually an exceptional time in my life. And as I was there, I just decided I didn't really want to pursue the whole PhD. And I graduated in September with my master's, and the economy crashed in October. And I had been so I had been working with this other company in the summer, working with kids with special needs, and I just loved being there. And they had come to me and said, our centers are doing really well. We have a job for you as a center director. You can run this school if you want to move to Chicago. So I actually moved right from Belgium to Chicago. And I did that because I didn't know what else to do. And here was this job being handed to me on a silver platter. And I said, absolutely, I'm going to take it. And I actually spent over 8 more years there as the center director and eventually the executive center director. And that was much more sales and marketing and meeting with families and working with kids. And I loved that. I knew it wasn't going to be the next 20 years of my life. I had already spent a good 12 years there in total. And I started volunteering at this place called Boston Healthcare for the Homeless Program. And I just loved working with the homeless. I just really connected with them. It felt like the next right step, and it's just this amazing program of primarily nurses and doctors and social workers and psychiatrists who just provide really top-notch care to those who are really the most vulnerable in our society. And so I scanned the website every single day for something that I could do, and there became this opportunity to work with the president there, who's actually the graduation speaker at Holy Cross last year, the commencement speaker. And so I'm technically considered his administrative assistant in my day, and I think we'll get into that later. But I do spend some time with the patient, and I do spend sometimes with administrative tasks, and I just love it. The best. I'm the luckiest person in the world right now. So.
Which neighborhood in Chicago?
I worked in Oak Park.
Okay.
And I lived in Old Town.
Okay, cool. I lived in Lincoln Park, just over the Old Town.
Oh, right there. Yeah. There's something about being by that lake that makes you feel like you're still on the East Coast.
Yeah.
You can fool yourself for a little while.
Yeah. Cool. Well, my name is Sarah. I graduated in 2014, and right after I graduated, I joined Teach for America. And my plan originally was to try to stay on the East Coast. And you have to rank your site placements, and there are 10 spots. Only 9 are on the Eastern Seaboard, so I put those as my first 9, and then it was either Detroit or Chicago for number 10, figuring that I wouldn't get my number 10 choice, and I got my number 10. So I was placed in Chicago. And I moved there directly after graduating, where I taught high school and middle school special education, mostly kids with learning disabilities and like social, emotional, behavioral disorders. So I taught in a public charter K-12 school in the Marquette Park neighborhood on the south side. And while I was going to school, I also got my master's in special education. And the way that life kind of happened, my partner and I were looking to move back to the East Coast. And so I just started, scouring job boards and found something at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, and it's one of Yale's psychology research centers. And the work that we do is really like at the intersection of education and emotions. So we study how emotions affect teaching and learning, and in turn what we do is develop curriculum so that teachers can learn these skills and also teach those skills to their students. And so what I do now is I manage all of the middle school work that we do. So I train teachers, I develop curriculum, I do a lot of coaching. I really do a lot of different things. Right now I'm co-writing a paper with the director of the center, so a lot of really cool stuff. And it kind of just happened nicely. So yeah, here I am.
My name is Mark. I graduated in 2009. So when I was here at Holy Cross, I took part in the summer internship program, and through that I was afforded an opportunity to work with the same company upon graduation. So I took that job, and I was there for about 2 years in a rotational program that was with Hanover Insurance, which is down the street in Worcester. And so I was there for about 2 years, and then after that I kind of didn't really find anything within the company that was really speaking to me, so I started looking elsewhere, and got a job in retail real estate for Clark's, the shoe company. So basically helping them figure out where to place their stores. So a lot of market research, things like that. And then just moved on to TJX. I've been there for about 3.5 years, doing the same type of thing, just a little more experience, and they have some different systems, things like that, but the same kind of process. And yeah, I've been there for 3.5 years and still going.
Awesome. My name is Neem Hakim. I'm class of 2014. So it's been 4 years now, which is almost 4 years, which is actually crazy to believe. So my career trajectory was kind of interesting in the sense that I actually had a really hard time getting a job my senior year of college. I pretty much applied to a bunch of places and had a hard time finding luck. I was doing interviews. I feel like I was doing all the things. The year before, when I was a junior, I was an intern in the Washington semester program, and I was interning. I was lucky enough to get an opportunity to intern at the White House. So a year later, when I was looking for jobs, I got a call from my former supervisor at the White House and said, "Would you consider working here?" And I said, "Obviously, yes. I'm on the market." So I went to go work at the White House. I asked for a week after graduation, didn't get it. So I drove down the day of graduation down to Washington and started working at the White House the Tuesday after graduation, because the Monday was a federal holiday. And then was in that job for about 2 years. After 2 years, the office that I was in the Office of Communications, and I was a researcher, so somewhat of an analyst of the news, and I would support our press operation and our speech writing team by giving assessments of what major trends were developing in the news, what we had to be on top of, and advise our communication staff to make decisions about messaging based on the research that I was collecting and that I was analyzing. After about 2 years in that position, I went to the Department of Homeland Security, where I was a spokesperson. So my job was speaking with reporters and journalists on the record on behalf of the administration. And after about a year in that job, I left government, obviously, because I was with the administration, and that changed. So I went off to become where I am now, which is at Broder Partners, which is a public relations firm in Boston. And so a lot of the work that I do now is working with a whole range of clients from different industries on trying to tell their stories and try to examine who are the spokespeople in their organizations that we want to leverage for engaging with the media, and who can speak to the media, who has a story to tell. And so a lot of what I do is trying to examine, with clients where they have an opportunity to get news coverage, and then help them integrate that sort of coverage to meet their business goals. So that's my 4 years.
So the cool thing is you guys are all over the place, which is great. And the sort of the two things that I think of immediately are, first, like, how did you get your jobs, right? Like the basic process of starting from an undergraduate degree and moving into, or master's, and moving into the workplace, making connections. Was it networking? Did you use any of the Holy Cross Career Services? I mean, there's so many opportunities here that I think a lot of people don't know about. Did you use any of those, or just network? So let's do that one first. Anybody, how did you find things? And did you get any of the philosophy kind of thing? Yeah. So how do you answer that, right? Like, what do you say when they?
Yeah, I mean, for that question directly, it was just more, I loved it. When I kind of stumbled into it, I was just filling out my prereqs for the general requirements, and I had to take a philosophy requirement, so I took the class, and just all of a sudden, maybe a couple weeks in, I was just, this is great. This is the only one of my classes that I feel really good about, really enjoy every moment of. That was that in terms of coming to philosophy. And then in terms of finding my job, it was really networking, not so much networking the way that people talk about it. They usually think of going to events and shaking hands and things like that. But for me, it was the summer internship program. And there was, an internship sponsored by J.D. Power, who was a graduate of Holy Cross, and it was at the Hanover Insurance Group, who their CEO at the time was a Holy Cross grad. So there was a lot of that connection, and then that kind of got me in the door, and then from there, I just hit it off with the group that I was with, and they gave me an opportunity once I graduated.
Once you're in, it's just doing the job and
exactly.
Doing all of that.
It's really just getting that first step.
Yeah. Okay, so summer internship program, and then the Holy Cross network, and some luck, always. Other?
Mine kind of fell into my lap a little bit. So I hadn't heard of Teach for America before my senior year, and then I was starting to think about what the next few months were going to look like as far as a job search, and I really had no idea what I wanted to do. And I got an email from a Teach for America recruiter that I had been referred by a Holy Cross alum, so it was like networking, like by way of which I had no role in, which was interesting but kind of cool. So I did a little bit of research on Teach for America. In hindsight, and this could be a whole different conversation, I wish I would have done a little bit more in-depth research, but I hadn't taken ethics yet at that point. So I ended up applying to Teach for America, getting in, and then once I was in, the Teach for America network is actually really strong, and so once I decided to leave the classroom, that was just a matter of really utilizing like their online portals and stuff. But I actually did leverage a few Holy Cross resources, and then I did contact Career Services when I was planning to move back. I contacted some old professors. None of that actually led to where I am now, but I felt like being able to talk to so many people allowed me to even further figure out like what I wanted to do after I left the classroom. And as far as getting into philosophy, your Montserrat was actually also last on my list for the one that I wanted to do. And it was because I wanted to knock out a philosophy for my Montserrat, because I had heard horror stories about philosophy. But lo and behold, your Montserrat was, I felt like it was talking about life in the world in ways that made sense to me. And even though I feel like ideologically, at least my freshman year, I was very counter to what most people in my class were, the ways that they were thinking and talking about things, but it just clicked for me, and I decided that I wanted to think through questions that I wanted to ask and answer through that lens. So.
Any other good stories about finding jobs, or is it just work and luck?
Well, both, definitely. I did not get to the White House for no shortage of luck, right? It was completely luck in the sense that, you later find out that you are part of a ton of different resumes, and the person that reviewed mine had a humanities background, and the person had an appreciation for political science and philosophy. And for some perspective, the office that I worked in when I was a researcher was like all humanities. It wasn't like business majors, it wasn't communications majors, it was like history, English, philosophy. I mean, that was just the norm. And frankly, in my view, my completely biased view, they're just better writers. Which is super important for communications, because you have to know, and also constructing arguments and being able to, there's so many basic elements to communications that I can teach you how to talk to a reporter. I can that's going to take some time, but I can teach those particulars. Understanding how to formulate arguments, understanding how to think critically, those things take a lot of time, and jobs, employers don't have the time for it. So I think for me, when I was looking, I never really felt like I had to justify philosophy on my resume, and I was lucky for that. But I also think that says that there are plenty of folks out there in certain industries who do not. I think it's kind of a total myth that philosophy is not a competitive major, and that's just kind of my opinion. But you can also look at the statistics on how a lot of CEOs come from philosophy backgrounds or other humanities backgrounds. So there's kind of a myth out there that I don't agree with, but I think for me personally, if anything, I think it enhanced my prospects.
I would piggyback on that. So I think the reason why I have the job that I have now is actually because my current boss studied philosophy as well, and we really connected over that. So during the interview, that's what we talked about. Who do you read? Would you write your thesis on? Would you like? What do you think about this? And being in a world that is so gray ethically, I think it actually really helps more than anything. I think I also work with a lot of people who study philosophy as well. But based on the fact that I do interviews here at Holy Cross on Saturdays in the fall, I actually don't think it's luck at all. I think you might think it's luck, but it's really not. I mean, interviewing the people who get into the college, it is brutal. I mean, I know that the people who are here are the best of the best already. They already have so much potential, and they already have so much of what employers are eventually looking for, that I almost feel like you can kind of have some fun while you're here, because there's so much going on at Holy Cross that's really putting you in a good spot. I mean, I remember things like, I had to take a dinner on what is a 401k before I graduated. There was an etiquette dinner. No other college offers an etiquette dinner.
An etiquette thing?
We did when you were here.
Maybe bring that back.
Perhaps we should bring that.
Yeah, we had a very generous grant that let us do it for
That's
years.
interesting.
There was a summer internship program. When I was here, the summer internship program is, I think, different than it is now. It was competitive to get into. I have to say, for me, none of it really spoke to me. So when I got my first job, I found it on my own through a lot of research. But a lot of my friends said to use the summer internship program. But looking at the candidates who are sitting in interviews before you even get to Holy Cross, you already know this is the type of person you're going to want to hire down the road. When I was the director at Holy Cross, this is the first place I came to say, can you send me? We would hire about 20 students. We liked college students because it was a summer position. We would say, please send us 20 people. And I would never forget, I was in a super bind. And I needed to hire 8 people that weekend. And I emailed, I don't know if it was you, Amy, or someone else from the career department, and I said, I really need to hire people. I can't find anything. It was a test you had to take. There was nothing you could do about it. You either had to pass or you couldn't be hired. No one was passing. And these were all the Boston colleges that we were looking at. And I emailed and I said, send me 20 people on Saturday, please. I'll do interviews all day long. They just have to pass the test. And lo and behold, 8 people left the jobs. God. So I would actually say, I think just the Holy Cross way, starting with the admissions process, that puts you in a place where you're already so poised to step into.
So partly hearing that the Holy Cross students, which I happen to believe as well, are really sort of a uniquely talented, skilled set of people coming in, and that those are going to play out well in the workplace. And so there's a little bit of room here to explore and to develop your own interests. Like, it doesn't have to be job training all the time. Or another way to put that is that part of preparing for a job that you're really going to love or find rewarding, or a life that you're going to love or find rewarding, is developing yourself ahead of time and going to etiquette dinners, which I'm very intrigued by and probably in need of. And sort of getting outside the practical stuff that people are getting so obsessed with now. And also the possibility that you know, for people who like the humanities and liberal arts and philosophy, it's a point of connection. Although we have to come back to, for the people who don't like that, like how to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, it sounded like the way you were talking was almost, it's kind of how I view philosophy. It's like, I feel like with a lot of other disciplines, and I double majored in psychology, a lot of psychology, at least the way that I did it, I was a research assistant, I did independent research, a lot of it is not necessarily siloed off, but you have to view the world through one very specific lens and through some really specific constructs, whereas in philosophy I feel like I was allowed to attend to the world in so many different ways because I was afforded the opportunity to be able to read and study and analyze what different people thought about the world. And in that sense I felt like I was more able to be immersed in and tuned with everything around me more so than I was in other classes.
So very adaptable, more open, and that carries over? You can still use that?
I mean, I
Or
think
not so much?
not necessarily in that way. I think what it allows me to do is I'm a lot better now at being able to hold different viewpoints in it at the same time. I feel like prior to philosophy, I still am stubborn, I think, but I'm at least now I can. A lot of what philosophy has allowed me to do is really distill what somebody's actually trying to say. We talked a lot about how like people right now are just having difficulty having conversations with one another, and a lot of what we all want is the same thing. A lot of us have the same values, but we have different ideas of how we ought to get there, and I feel like philosophy has allowed me to better unpack that with people that I disagree with, and especially now in my workplace, where we have a lot of issues around equity in that it's in our mission statement, but we're not necessarily fostering it, and I feel like I've been able to have conversations about how we get there, because we all want the same thing, but it's just a matter of practice, and philosophy has for sure allowed me to do that. So.
Awesome. I tell my students it works that way, but it's good to know it's actually true.
Yeah.
So,
I would also say I don't want to downplay the importance of networking either, because I think that it's definitely true that Holy Cross is a strong network. It's definitely true that that will get you very far. Philosophy, I think, does give you very practical skills to succeed. There are a lot of other things you need to be able to do to get a job in this market, and that first and foremost, in my view, is being proactive. When I think back to, the reason I got the job at the White House was because I interned at the White House. The only reason I got the internship was because I did internships for Governor Patrick, and I did internships with Mayor Petty, the mayor of Worcester, still the mayor today, when I was the summer after my sophomore year. And so I pursued those internships because I knew that if I was going to get that internship, I needed this and these internships. And even that way of thinking strategically, I think, is something that philosophy reinforces, but you do have to be proactive in that sense, where you can't expect the job to come to you. You have to be willing to go out there and network and meet new people and get coffee. One thing I will say is that you'd be shocked as to how many people are willing to just sit down with you and get coffee and try to be helpful. And that's something that's you definitely have through the Holy Cross Network. But you know, I think it's a combination, right? Like, it's not. I wouldn't want to suggest that philosophy is definitely going to get you the job. Although I do think it will equip you with, differentiated factors for the long term of your career. You also have to be very proactive, and so I think that's critical. Every job that I've gotten is because the internships that I got that summer were because we had a student government event. So, we were had an event in the local, like a local elementary school, where Holy Cross was donating a couple $1,000s to a local library so that they could automate their public library system. And so I went there and just spoke about the reason why students need to support, the community. And then at the event was the mayor of Worcester. He came over and said, "Oh, it was like, thanks for coming. Like, it was good to have you." And then I spoke to a couple folks there. I did networking at that event, and that resulted in internships, which resulted in other things. So it's kind of amazing where you'll find leads, but you just got to be proactive. And you got to be. I think that's just why you're balancing the sort of the big questions in philosophy, which is a good thing to do. You want to make sure you're also grounding yourself in certain realities. I think that's just part of this economy, which is actually pretty good right now, but also, just waiting for it, I guess, but who knows? But yeah, I just wanted to add that to the conversation, because I do think that, you have to be willing to put in the work too, because I think there is this, not tendency, but certainly in philosophy, one thing you have to be careful about is to fall back on the big questions. And the difficulty is that you get so sort of, enamored and fascinated by the big questions like consciousness and existence. And one thing I would say is, don't mention, don't use the word phenomenology in a job interview, or don't mention certain terms.
That sounds like a great takeaway.
And that's not to say, don't be who you are, but it is to say that, in the realities, you have to be willing, you have to know how to play your major a little bit and recognize that there are some particulars that we're facing. It's going to be helpful in the long term, but also I think you have to kind of know the realities. And I could ground what I just said into different philosophical philosophers that I've read over the course of my time at Holy Cross, or the reasons why I believe those things. But yeah, I would just add that.
Yeah, I mean, for sure for me, I kind of started with my sales pitch from the get-go when I decided to major in philosophy, because I had to sell my parents first and foremost, since they were helping me pay for my education. And so I just kind of focused on the tools that I would develop, and more kind of focusing on the process of studying philosophy as opposed to the actual knowledge or the facts that you remember and things like that. So just, I can research anything. I don't need to know anything about the topic. Just tell me what you need me to find out, and I'll go do it. Things like that. And I feel that it's very transferable. And yeah, like I said, I was able to sell my parents, and then 2 years later, I don't think I declared until I was a sophomore. Once I was able to get a job, it was kind of the same type of thing, and I had better examples as to how I did it. But yeah, it was the same kind of argument in terms of just focusing on the process and the tools that I was able to develop, as opposed to just getting a training that would get me a job doing the same thing I was trying to do.
So do you have a sense that was just a sales pitch and it wasn't really true? Or do you really feel like you really do?
Oh, I believed it wholeheartedly.
Okay.
It was just something, I think, to your point, that I knew there was a practical aspect to it. So I could believe it, but if I wasn't able to sell it, it was kind of worthless. So I had to not only have the idea that you develop in philosophy, but I also had to have the practical application of being able to communicate it, which I suppose is another quality that you've developed studying philosophy. I had to have that practical aspect in order to actually make the sale.
Yeah. I wonder if especially for the two most recent grads, could we in the department do more to help with this? Well, actually, of course we could do more, because I don't think we do anything. Is there something that we could do to help prepare people to make this kind of transition, or do you think it's sufficiently obvious how to do it that students know how to sell their philosophy major? I'm not asking this very well. Do you see what I mean? Or for the students here, what?
I mean, all I would say is I think I would say a couple of things. I would say first, for me, one thing I didn't mention was I was actually double major. So I was political science and philosophy double major. So for going to government, people didn't really question the political science part. Maybe they questioned the philosophy one, although I don't feel like I experienced that as I noted earlier. But what I would say is, insofar as you can have a minor, insofar as you can have a double major, I don't know what the level of flexibility is today that the philosophy major enjoys with other degrees, but I'm a pretty strong believer that you want to be able to ground the techniques that philosophy will equip you with in certain fields. I did not love being a political science major, and the reason was not because of politics, it was because of the methodology. And I did not believe that social science was an adequate way of examining the world, which is what I wrote my senior thesis on. But knowing the particulars, like learning about the organizations, learning about the industries, and I imagine if I had done economics or another major, there would have been ways of just getting better exposure to, the institutions that are, having a big impact in the world. Taking international political economy and political science allowed me to learn about the IMF and the World Bank, and knowing about these things was really helpful when you're working in a government. And so that was one way of, I think, making it very practical. The second thing I would say would also be opportunities just for communications, oral communications. So for me, it was really good. My senior year when we did the senior thesis, if that could be a requirement of being a philosophy major, I think that would be great, just because the practice of learning how to communicate your ideas verbally, I think, is extremely important. And so for me, I had a big challenge of you're standing in front of the entire philosophy department, which, we know is going to ask you lots of questions from different angles. And you are about to throw these whole sets of assertions that you spent your entire year researching and developing, and they're about to come under a complete attack. And you have to defend yourself against their questions and their points and address their criticisms. And that exercise was really important in the sense of just getting to, I feel like when you verbalize things, it might even change the way that you had developed or thought about it. And verbal communications, at the end of the day, most jobs will require an interview. So in that process, you are developing certain faculties that will be helpful to that end. So I think those are just two things that are potential opportunities, but they were helpful to me.
Yeah, I would just wholeheartedly agree with that. The idea of, at least what's really helped me, is being able to verbalize ideas, but also have them criticized in front of me and being able to respond to that. So right now, the culture of the center that I work at is very sit down for a meeting, director has an idea, you need to be able to spit off 1,000 iterations of that idea in a second. And at least being a woman in philosophy too, I feel like many times I was intimidated or scared to speak up, but being able to learn how to really hold a lot of conviction in the way that I was saying things or the premises behind my arguments, and then further allowing those to be critiqued in front of me was so invaluable, I think, for anything. I think any job also requires you to be able to think on the spot. Teaching is, that's what you're doing constantly. And so even when it was adult to student, not just adult to adult, I feel like being able to clearly verbalize what I thought or believed and the reasons why, and then also allowing myself to be adaptable to criticisms or critiques or suggestions that I heard with regard to my ideas was so valuable. Yeah.
I saw you nodding while she was talking, sort of similar experiences.
Yeah, I think one of the benefits of studying philosophy, it's interesting because today we had our employee recognition event. So there are about 485 employees in the program. And I'm listening to descriptions of who's winning these awards. And so these are people who are making big changes in the world of healthcare and within our program, and working with Massachusetts just changed its whole model of how it's reimbursing for insurance and whatnot. And so I'm listening to what these people have done to get them awards. And throughout the whole thing, everyone who won an award, the accolades they were receiving had to do with their leadership and who they really are. It wasn't just, well, this person did this. It was, this person did this, and this is what makes them a great leader. They are patient. They are understanding. They solved a problem no one else could solve. It just came, as I was watching, it was just very interesting in that they were more value-based. And I think one of the benefits of studying philosophy is that you come to understand what your own values are. And one of the things I think is going to happen no matter what job you decide to take is that you're going to encounter challenges in the workplace, whether that's directly an ethical challenge or problem solving. And what's going to separate you from other people and make you that phenomenal leader that, is going to develop your career and make other people want to hire you is really who you are and how you respond to those situations. And so I think that doesn't just start when you're 30 or 40. That starts when you're 18. You need to make that decision at 18 to start thinking about who you are, what kind of leader you want to be. And I think the only way to do that is to really look to texts, look to who else has said what and when, and why was it important historically that they said that. And I think that type of background at that age is just going to prepare you to be way ahead of
Feel free to jump in if you have any additional.
I'd be interested in the role of mentors. If you've had mentors at any point, either in your time here at Holy Cross or in your job since. Roles, if any, they play.
I mean, I would say that absolutely. I think every job that I've gotten was because of a mentor, or if not directly, because they helped me think through what I needed and what I was looking for. I think Christopher Dustin was a huge mentor to me when I was a freshman. He's part of the reason why I chose philosophy. I think that when you go to a school as with a faculty-to-student ratio like Holy Cross, you have to avail yourself of office hours and like sitting down with your professors who can become your mentors. And I do think that a lot of the greatest lessons that I learned were in office hours. And you're talking about the text, but you're also talking about the thing about philosophy is that literally it follows you out of the room, It's because you grapple all these. It's not like you go and you learn about, a history course where we're talking about this point in history, then I walk out, I don't have to think about it anymore. If I walk into Joe Lawrence's office and talk about consciousness for like an hour, now I'm walking out and like questioning everything around me. But I still, I visit Professor Lawrence quite frequently, and I think, I would say absolutely the mentorship that, I've gotten from, philosophy professors has been huge, and, not just philosophy professors, but, I think you have to seek out mentors everywhere. It's critical. I feel like it's getting hard to find mentors. I will say that I think that could just be my personal experience. The reason I say that is because people seem busier than they may be. And I don't know if it's busier. I think it might just be people are looking at social media all the time. I don't really know what it is. I haven't tested this theory. But
maybe mentoring isn't institutionally valued anymore.
I don't want to make such a bold claim, but I think that it is. I found, and I think that this could be very unique to my personal experience. I wouldn't want to go beyond that because I think, I was coming out of government, and all of my mentors who were senior staffers were also unemployed because we all worked for Barack Obama and now didn't have jobs. So it was great,
My whole network.
My whole network is first all the people who worked for longer than you are going to get employed, and that could take 3 to 4 months, and then it's you, and so on and so forth. And in those moments, I think it was the not necessarily career mentors, but the life mentors, and I kind of had different categories of mentors who were particularly useful because I got to sit down and have these conversations and help me think through things. But me personally, I don't really think any of my successes I can attribute to myself. I'm a big believer that it's your mentors. So I would say, definitely, absolutely, of course.
Yeah, I didn't have that one-on-one this is my mentor relationship, but I feel like everywhere along the way you're just taking pieces of people that that you interact with. At first it's obviously your parents, but even from there, the professors here, and I know for me, at my first job, had kind of 2 managers, and both of them I got a good sense of what their values were and how they aligned with mine, and they were good role models for me. And it was actually, I guess, a little surprising. You kind of go into this process, you start your job as soon as you graduate, and you're kind of gung-ho to just get after it and work really hard. And it wasn't that I wasn't working really hard, but these two managers that I had kind of focused. They were really accomplished kind of in previous stops, and I think they both kind of realized I'm working 60, 70 hours a week, I'm doing all these great things, but I want to do other things. I want to, I value family life and having children and things like that. So right away for me, I kind of had that perspective. And I also feel like with the philosophy background, I was kind of able to appreciate that a little better maybe. Just being able to pivot quickly, understand both sides, and then even if I was focused on one side, once I kind of realized, oh, maybe there's more to this whole equation, was able to kind of see really where my preferences lie.
So sort of pieces of what you were saying about being more intuitively able to capture different sides of an argument or to recognize the likelihood of a different perspective and pivot on that, as well as a little bit of an echo of this idea that part of what you got out of studying philosophy, like there are all the skills and things like that, but there's also a deeper sense of who you are and what you value, and the ability to articulate that, at least to yourself, and maybe to other people, and then that kind of gave you an anchor once you hit corporate America, which might have been a little less welcoming to that kind of thing. So you were sort of better able to hold on to that. So, am I making that up, or is
No,
that,
I think that's definitely accurate.
No.
I think to the credit of the faculty too, though, you, at least my experience has been, you kind of demand those questions of us. I remember, Kenny has been, I feel like at every passing turn in my academic career, professional career. I've known you for like almost 8 years now, maybe. I know it's sick. Yeah, but so she was my Montserrat professor, and I feel like, when I say I have hundreds of emails I've sent to this woman, like I don't leave her alone. It's really, it would be gracious enough for her to read them, but she actually responds to them too. But I remember specifically, there was one moment where I had my final interview for Teach for America, and then I was also kind of being pushed in the direction of psych research, and I wasn't really sure about psych research, wasn't sure about TFA, and I was like huffing and puffing on the way up to office hours, being like, I don't know what I'm gonna do, like just kind of pissed off about the whole thing. And you didn't even like touch on the subjects of what I was considering. You said, what kind of person do you want to be? And it was just really special, I think. So yeah, you not only does philosophy equip us to do that, but the faculty demands that we do that. So yeah, I'm proud.
Do you two have questions for you on this one?
Yeah, so my situation is kind of, I'm really glad I heard all those stories. I don't know how much it applies to me because I'm much more all over the map, like literally, because I'm an international student and I have job opportunity both in Asia. Not really here, that's what I'm saying. So, what has been presented here might not really work for me. Like, I don't really have time to wander off a year or to find a job. I have to immediately, because I only have 2 months if I don't get a job right after graduation. So I'm looking into grad school and stuff, hoping to find my time. But, yeah, and I also work intern last summer for consulting, strategy consulting, and I didn't really find like what I do. And I also got testimony from previous graduates, not from our school, but philosophy majors who said, yeah, those working in finance or business industries don't really have, it's not a benefit to say. I feel that, like, my process of thinking is different than people.
Like in a useful way or in an unuseful way? Or both?
It depends on the situation. Some certain reflections, like how to proceed to the task. We're like usually doing most modern research jobs, and how to acquire information or how to do this probably help in that sense. Like too much information, like piling up also like stop you from making decisions. That was my sense of doing philosophy, not only in the business world, but everyday life. It's just making things difficult. So, not like shifting entire gear, trying to be analyst in psychology. But it just recently happened. I'm taking a class with my friend.
I'd actually like to address this,
Yes.
if that's okay. And I say this because I am older than everyone else here.
Oh, honey.
You know, and it's actually interesting in that I was in the same room. So 2008, you guys might be a little bit too young to understand, but 2008, the economy literally crashed. I can assure you that everyone who graduated in 2005, 2006, 2007, who thought they had life made because they had studied finance and accounting and had that internship on Wall Street and went right to Wall Street after they were done and, you know, spent spring semester partying because they had been offered the job the fall before. Meanwhile, I'm, you know, in philosophy, like sweating. What am I going to do? I have to say, the moment where I did feel really lucky was sitting right here. It was a Women in Business conference in this room, and women were just crying. They were crying because they had done the right thing. They had studied finance and accounting. They had been offered a job 8 months before they left school. And now what on earth are they going to do? And they have expensive apartments in New York City, and they just can't afford anything. They can't find anything. There's no other job around. And I just have to say, that's almost where the faith part has to come in. You don't know what's going to happen in life ever. So meanwhile, I've studied philosophy, spent time in Europe getting my master's, but I have the job. And so that's why I think it comes down to, there's always going to be time, and you have to try to work with that and balance things, but you also have to try to do what you feel passionate about and what you love, because people read that just as much as in an interview. They're reading your resume, but they're also reading who you are, the kind of energy you bring, and so many other skills that aren't just on paper. And I do think philosophy actually prepares you well in at least being the type of person who says, okay, well, I'm going to do anything. It's 2008, they're offering me a job in Chicago, I'm just going to live it up and go in Chicago and see what I can explore there. Or, you know, I'm just going to go to DC or send out this email and see what I can do. So I think the part you can never control for is what happens historically. And so even if you think you're totally prepared, it might come down to just who you are and what you're willing to do. More so. Those people are all good now. They all have jobs again. The economy is amazing right now. But that was a really hard time, and you don't know if that can happen again.
Yeah, so
In 3 months.
I would agree with what you said about passion. So I was a corporate lawyer for 15 years before I did the philosophy thing. And so both my experience hiring as an attorney, hiring associates at my firm, or hiring consultants to do jobs when we were doing deals and things like that, as well as my experience hiring faculty here, over and over again, you know, I have the paperwork before we have an interview. You know, you have to clear a hurdle to get to the interview, right? And that's maybe your GPA if you're really recent. It's your background, your skills, your letters of recommendation. You know, that gets you the interview. But once you're in the interview, I need to want to work with you, right? You know, if you're having an interview, you've already cleared the basic hurdle. You've established basic competence for the most part. Now I want to know if I want you as a colleague or not. And if you're just a techie, if you're technically competent but unable to communicate any kind of engagement or enthusiasm or excitement or anything, I don't want to work with you, especially if I'm working 60, 70, 80 hours a week. I don't want to spend time with you. And so having something that you can generate enthusiasm about, even if it's idiosyncratic, gives you a chance to display some kind of passion and engagement, even if it's not shared. And one of the things I found studying philosophy late in life is that it helped me at the time. So as a fleeing corporate America as I was at the time, it helped me kind of rediscover my passions or the possibility of being passionate about things that weren't useful. Not, hey, this is great because this is going to get me to here, but just, wow, this is just right here great. This is cool. And I used to come back to my office. I was taking night classes while I was still a lawyer, and I would come back and people would gather around at my law office. They read my term papers in my philosophy classes because they were so starved for something beautiful. I mean, not my papers, but the stuff I was talking about, right? And so the possibility of having something that you think is beautiful, that you're willing to be passionate about, capable of being passionate about, is first of all great for a good life, but also useful in a job interview. To be able to bring something.
Yeah, I would also. I think you have to. I think you have to think, be concerned about the job. You have to be concerned about the work. Everyone has their realities, right? Like there are certain limitations for everybody in terms of the market, where they can be, whether it's in this country or if it's another country. And it may take you some time to find something. You may find something that you really like. Or you might find something you don't like. And then, a lot of people spend the first decade or two of their careers figuring out what they don't like, and then fall into something that they're really passionate about. But beyond all of that, what I would advise would be to think as much as you can about your narrative. And what I mean specifically about that is, how does your personal story unfold from here? And thinking about that all the time is going to be really important for 10, 15, 20, 30 years for down the road when you're in interviews, right? People are going to want to know, well, why did you go from here to here to here to here? And if you have a thread that ties it all together, it's going to serve you well. So I think just not forgetting that and something important. The other thing is also, I think the Holy Cross Network is pretty global at this point too. I think it's global. It's at least somewhat global. I think, and if not, I know there were folks in our Washington semester who, spent time in Asia, ended up working in Asia. I also think, by the way, that's a pretty big asset. It's going to be in the next 20, 30 years or so.
Working abroad?
Yeah, of course. Especially experience in the Asia Pacific. I think it's a rapidly growing area of the world. Are you bilingual?
I'm trilingual.
Okay, so that's
Wow.
That's really good. Those things are huge. Finding out ways to, and you might not know immediately how to leverage that, but those are things to think about, right? Because there are, businesses or so, they want that because it's really expensive to teach an American to, learn how to read and write in a foreign language, and that's cost that a business wouldn't want to spend. So if you're just thinking from a business perspective, there's a huge incentive, to want to hire somebody who's trilingual even. But yeah, I think there are a lot of opportunities out there, and I think it would be, honestly, I do think in 20, 30 years, or less than that. It's happening now. There's going to be a huge demand for, I think, those sort of, basic skills. And then you add philosophy into the mix, and then I think it does make you more competitive. So just things to think about,
I like the idea of faith, either capital F if you're religious or small f if you're not religious, either way, that the first job doesn't have to be the one, right? Or even the second job. One of the basic realities of the world is sometimes you got to do stuff you don't want to do. Like you have to take logic, right? We were just talking about taking logic. And it may be that the first job just sucks, right? But it pays the bills and it keeps you here, especially to the extent that you're worried about stuff like that. And so for a while, you do a job that's not interesting, not rewarding, not very satisfying, and in your spare time, you can think deep thoughts. So
That's my other question. So
Okay.
in my conversation we have a assistant professor. I don't know how to say it.
Teresa?
Yeah, Teresa Fenshaw. She's like, so on one hand you have being a professional philosopher as an option. You want to integrate philosophy into your life fully, or you become getting to commercial America and do totally opposite stuff and not forget about it, but taking parts of it. Or in the middle you can, like weekends going to reading clubs and stuff. Does that even come across your mind, or like how does philosophy like play a role in your life like after graduating? I just don't really, like I wonder like how, because I know like every moment I'm not the same person obviously, but like 10 years or 5 years from now, like my passion for philosophy, would it decrease to what extent, or would I like long for it because I'm so away from it? Like, what is the reality being played out?
So that's why I went on to graduate school, is because I just felt like I had never expected to be interested in it. I took Philosophy 101 with Joe Lawrence, and he just captivated me. But I was also thinking about French and art history and psychology and all these other things, and I didn't declare until I absolutely had to, because I just wanted to play them all out. And then I came to understand philosophy as the underliner of all of it, right? Like in philosophy, I could take one class about art, and then I could take another class about ethics, and then I could take another class about, political philosophy. So it was a way to, even within a liberal arts school, really get at the bottom about all of it. So I really liked that aspect of it, and I just didn't have enough. By the time I had graduated, I felt like I needed more. I'm not done with it. This feeling of being finished. And so I went on to pursue even more. And then at that point, I realized, okay, well, I could spend my whole life in an office reading and writing papers by myself, or I've come to see all these special need kids who just really need an advocate. And I just felt compelled to go be their advocate and be there for them. And it seemed like the right thing to do at that time. And I think that's, when you're at college and you're thinking about the future and what you want to do, I think that very literal thinking of, I am this, is actually the danger. And it's even the danger when you hear, I am a philosophy major, and people identify so closely with it that they forget all the other passions they had as well. So I think, one, you don't want to define yourself as just one thing. You want to think in terms of, I like philosophy, and I love art, and I love exercising, and I love this, and I love that, and that's what creates that well-rounded person that people eventually want to hire. But I think you also want to think about your trajectory in that way. You don't want just, I'll give you an example. Some of my very close friends are doctors, and that's all they pictured themselves being. And now that they are doctors and have been for several years, they're saying, and now what? Right? Like, I studied biology, did the pre-med thing, went right to med school, and now what? They're there, and that's what they have. And it's very literal. And I have to say that some of them are dissatisfied with their lives because they don't have that something more. And I think it's a little bit riskier to say I'm going to study philosophy and I'm going to just be an awesome person and try to get, each step as I get there, I'm going to get there. But I feel like, I don't know, it's a better life. Maybe that's just because it's mine, but it is more fulfilling in that way. And in that way, I don't feel like I'm missing philosophy. I have to say this, 10 years out, more than 10 years out, it's very challenging to read books now. I'm like, did I really understand it? Maybe I should be practicing as I go along, because suddenly I'm like, how did I know that then? But yeah, I don't feel like I'm missing anything. I do still feel like I'm living a meaningful life, but it's because of the decisions I've made, not necessarily just because of the philosophy. But yes, it is always there on the weekends or at night or whenever you used to live. Just don't sell your books back.
That's definitely true. I still regret that I can't find certain books today. But I mean, just for some context, I'm constantly reading philosophy, and I hate the notion that you're only a real philosopher if you get a PhD. And I think it's a very, very, I feel very passionate about this one actually, because I knew a lot of people from my class here who were going to be real philosophers, and they tried to go in that direction. It did not work out for them, and it went very badly for them. Not to say that they're not happy where they are now, but there's this. I like, if you think Socrates had a PhD at a university, I know he kind of, his prodigies went on to kind of create universities, but being a philosopher is not a degree. Like, it is a lifestyle, it is what you want to do, it's what you're seeking in life, which can, like you mentioned, actually make life kind of hard sometimes, because now you're asking all these questions that no one else is asking, and you're like, well, darn, I kind of just want to shut that off every now and then and enjoy what's going on. That being said, the fact that you're asking those questions will serve you extremely well in your career. One example that I see that every day is, especially I work in media relations, right? So we have to think about, okay, when we put the CEO in an interview with like the Washington Post, what are they going to ask? And that requires the ability to think every single possible question somebody could ask a CEO, and then trying to anticipate how they're going to react. And so you're constantly applying philosophy in that, because you're thinking, okay, where's this argument weak? Have we addressed that concern? And then what I found for me personally is, I'm that person in the conference room saying, did anybody think about this? What about this question? What about this question? Almost to the point where people are saying, like, okay, shut up. We got all of our talking points. You're not going to ask that. Why is Nima always thinking about the worst case scenario? And the reason is I worked in Homeland Security, so that kind of messed with me in other ways. I think, you're constantly part of it. And for me, like, I'm writing a lot. I write. That's when I found one of the greatest joys in my life is I write for like 10 hours every weekend. So I'm just journaling. I'm writing reflections. I'm trying to write my own philosophy. And I don't have a degree, and I'm not getting a master's level or a PhD training. But I'm reading a lot of philosophy. Like, this past year I read Adam Smith, Weber, and like a bunch of other philosophers who I hate. Sorry about that. Not yeah. Well,
We'll talk.
yeah, we could talk, right? So, but I think for me, it's like you're constantly curious. That doesn't end when you leave, and I do think it's important to read it. And I mean, for me, I remember visiting Professor Lawrence at his home and just having like coffee, and was like, hey, I'm really interested in these different topics. What philosophy should I read? Right? When you begin any semester here at Holy Cross, you get your curriculum, or not your curriculum, but your syllabus, right? Which lists the books you're going to read and the homework assignments. It was literally just me going to Professor Lawrence and saying, and then that Professor Hess too. I always ask, what books should I read? Because you should keep reading, and you should keep learning, and that doesn't have to stop. I think if you really are committed to philosophy, it's not like a 4-year thing. I think it's like a life thing, which goes to your point, which is that, once people have achieved their trade, they've done all the master's programs, they've landed in their careers, okay, like what now? Well, I think a philosopher knows that that's a trade, and I have other things to my identity and my humanity, and I'm going to explore those things too, and I'm going to reinforce that with philosophy and literature and other pursuits that can keep that part alive. I don't think that goes away. You have weekends and you have evenings, and if it's something that you're really committed to, you can keep it up. You have to work at it, but you can keep it up.
I think on a practical level too, I think you had mentioned how some of your friends were on a linear path, and philosophy allows you a lot more flexibility. And another just kind of practical piece of advice that I would give is don't be afraid to kind of maybe move sideways before you kind of go forward in one direction. I kind of think of like as a tennis player, you kind of like hop up and down when the ball is on the other side, and then when it comes back to you, then you have to dart at it and put a shot back. So if you need to take a job, kind of just like stay still, stay ready, to try to figure out where exactly you want to be, what aligns with your values and what you really like. Don't hesitate to do that. You can spend a year, 2 years, you can spend 5 or 10, if that's how long it takes, trying to figure out what makes the most sense for you, and then just go after it as hard as you can once you figure it out.
Do you have any questions, or is this kind of
my question was along the lines of Ying's question. Is basically like how does your interest in philosophy like play out into your normal life now? Does it have an outlet? But I think the beautiful thing that has been reinforced here is that philosophy becomes a worldview, more than anything else. Like after you graduate, that it's not just this sticker that you wear on your shirt, or on your resume. It's not a brand. I think that's been really great to hear.
Well, I definitely don't want to keep people longer than you agreed, than you were expecting. Again, really appreciate you guys coming in from all the places you came in from and sharing your thoughts and your ideas. We will be working with the recording of this for a while to put together something for the website for people who are thinking about the major, and perhaps career services might be making use of some of this as well. So again, thank you all so much for coming in, and you have renewed my hope. I am at that point in the semester where I feel like I'm a terrible teacher and nothing ever works, and I'm a total fraud, and I don't even know what we're doing here, and it doesn't. But you've kind of helped me remember what we're doing here. So thank you. So thank you for that. And all right.
Great.
Excellent.
Thank you.